He just wanted a quiet coffee break. But when the janitor casually switched from Mandarin to Swahili over a phone call, the CEO nearly dropped his mug. Nathan Hayes, 44, CEO of LinguaCore, a fast-growing multinational language services firm, had come down from the executive suite to grab a refill from the break room, hoping for a few minutes of quiet before a packed morning of global expansion meetings. The last thing he expected was to overhear a janitor speaking fluently in French, then Spanish, then Japanese, and finally something he recognized as Zulu, all with effortless precision. The man was Alex Tran, a soft-spoken Vietnamese custodian in his early 50s, someone Nathan had passed in the hallway dozens of times without a second glance. But today, as Alex stood by the vending machine discussing what sounded like linguistic syntax with someone on the phone, Nathan felt something shift. He paused mid-sip, stunned, not just by the number of languages, but by the fact that this conversation was happening right under his nose, in the most overlooked corner of his own company. Nathan Hayes had built LinguaCore from the ground up, a company born in his garage and grown into a global powerhouse in multilingual communication services. Known for his sharp instincts and hands-on leadership, Nathan had once prided himself on knowing the pulse of every department. But lately, something had shifted. As the company expanded, so did the distance between the executive boardroom and the realities on the ground floor. Teams were chasing metrics instead of meaning. Internal memos sounded more like PR campaigns than problem-solving, and worst of all, their highly anticipated Africa expansion project, meant to launch localized services across key regions, had hit a wall. Months of effort, six-figure consultant fees, and endless strategy calls had produced little more than frustration. No one on the team had the right cultural insight or language fluency to build trust in these diverse markets. Despite their polished resumes, the so-called experts didn't speak the languages of the people they were trying to reach, literally or figuratively. Meanwhile, on the night shift, someone with exactly those skills had been mopping floors unnoticed. Alex Tran had been with the company for 2 years, working quietly after hours. Colleagues knew him only as the janitor, a kind man who kept to himself and always had a thermos of tea in hand. What they didn't know was that before coming to the US, Alex had spent over 2 decades as a linguistics professor, teaching in universities across Europe and Southeast Asia. War, immigration policy, and a few bad breaks had reset his life in America. Without credentials that transferred and limited by his visa status, he took the job he could get, cleaning offices in a company built around language, irony, and tragedy blending into one. He never bragged, never volunteered his story. Why would he? No one ever asked. That morning, when Nathan overheard Alex speaking 4 languages in a single conversation, fluid, precise, and unpretentious, something clicked. In one moment, the CEO saw everything he'd been missing. Not just a skilled linguist, but a reflection of the company's original spirit: resourcefulness, humility, and human connection. This wasn't about charity or a viral redemption arc. It was about how a billion-dollar company had nearly overlooked one of its most valuable assets simply because he wore coveralls instead of a suit. Nathan realized the problem wasn't just in the African expansion. It was in the culture they'd created, one that stopped listening to people who didn't look like they had something to say. What else had they missed? How many other Alex Trans were silently sweeping corners while boardrooms echoed with half-baked strategies? As the sun rose outside and executives began filing into the elevators, Nathan stayed in the break room a little longer, sipping cold coffee and replaying the janitor's words in his head. The languages were different, but the message was clear. Maybe the soul of the company wasn't gone. Maybe it was just waiting for someone to pay attention. Nathan didn't confront Alex right away. Something about the moment felt too fragile to break, too important to rush. Instead, he pulled back and chose to observe quietly over the next few days. Was he imagining things? Was this janitor really who he appeared to be? Or had Nathan just latched onto a fantasy, desperate for meaning in a company that had started to feel hollow? But each day confirmed what his instincts had already sensed. During one late afternoon, Nathan lingered in the lobby just long enough to see Alex casually helping one of the younger security guards with his Japanese homework, correcting grammar with gentle precision and even recommending a textbook. Another day, while refilling the copy machine, Nathan overheard Alex softly coaching the receptionist on her German pronunciation, explaining the subtle difference between ch and sh like a seasoned teacher. Never loud, never boastful, always patient. Alex didn't act like someone trying to impress. He acted like someone who couldn't help but share what he knew, and yet none of it made its way to the company's internal radar. HR continued to burn through six-figure contracts with international consultants, fluent in business lingo but disconnected from cultural nuance. A recent draft report on the Africa expansion read like it had been generated by AI, generic, out of touch, and littered with phrases that would be borderline offensive in certain dialect regions. Worse, the global strategy team seemed more interested in corporate optics than genuine connection. Nathan had seen enough. It was time to test the waters, quietly. He tasked his assistant with pulling a complex training document the company had received from a partner in Côte d'Ivoire, written in a mix of French, Baoulé, and West African Arabic slang, and asked her to pass it along to Alex under the guise of a translation favor for an inter-office language initiative. No fanfare, no explanation. Just a printed packet left in the custodial lounge with a post-it note that read, "If you have time, would love your take on this." No pressure. And Nathan didn't expect a miracle. In fact, he told himself not to expect anything at all. Maybe Alex wouldn't respond. Maybe he'd feel insulted. Maybe Nathan had misjudged the whole thing. But the next morning, an envelope appeared on his desk. Inside was a meticulously translated version of the entire document, not just accurate, but adapted with localized idioms, cultural notes, and side annotations for context. Phrases that would have fallen flat in literal translation were transformed into fluid, human language. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "Hope this helps. Let me know if anything needs tweaking. Alex." Nathan read through the document twice, barely blinking. It wasn't just good, it was better than anything the firm's language consultants had produced in months. But more than the skill, it was the care that struck him. The way Alex treated language like a bridge, not a product. This wasn't some hidden talent waiting to be discovered for dramatic effect. This was a lifetime of dedication quietly mopped into every corner of a break room no one bothered to look twice at. Nathan sat back in his chair, stunned. The real problem wasn't just the cost of bad strategy, it was the cost of ignoring the voices that didn't sit at the table. The translation had taken Alex just under 4 hours. But it wasn't just accurate, it was alive. The kind of work that didn't just convert words, but carried meaning across borders. He'd adjusted for tone, embedded cultural context, and even included optional phrasing for different regional dialects. Nathan had reviewed the document 3 times before picking up the phone. He didn't want a formal meeting, he wanted a conversation. So that afternoon, he waited until Alex was finishing up in the break room and invited him to sit down over coffee. No titles, no agenda. Just 2 men at a table. At first, Alex seemed cautious, unsure if he'd done something wrong, but Nathan quickly put him at ease. "I've been watching," he admitted. "Your work, your conversations, your gift. Why didn't you ever say anything?" Alex stared at his coffee for a long second before answering. His voice was calm, even. "Because no one ever asked," he said, "and when they did, they weren't really listening. Here, I'm the guy with the mop. When people already think they know who you are, your story stops mattering." Nathan felt that like a punch to the chest. He realized in that moment that Alex hadn't just been overlooked, he'd been silenced by assumption. It wasn't that Alex had no ambition, it was that ambition had nowhere to go when locked behind other people's perceptions. Nathan pressed gently. "But you could have changed everything sooner," he said. "Why not try?" Alex gave a half smile, more weary than bitter. "You ever try talking into a room that's already made up its mind about you?" That landed harder than anything Nathan had read in any strategy memo. Because Alex was right, this wasn't about one missed opportunity. It was about a system that told people where they belonged based on surface impressions. And worse, it was about a company that once stood for connection, but had become so busy scaling up, it had stopped seeing the people who made it work. Nathan thought about the glossy corporate posters in the lobby. Diversity, inclusion, innovation, all buzzwords that rang hollow if the people they represented never got invited to speak. This wasn't a talent gap, it was a listening gap. LinguaCore hadn't failed to find the right voices, it had simply forgotten how to hear them. In that instant, Nathan knew things had to change, radically and fast. Not just because of Alex, but because of what Alex represented. A quiet reckoning. If a man who could translate 5 languages with nuance and dignity was being treated like an afterthought, how many others had they missed? How many people in this building were silently waiting for someone to knock on the metaphorical door and say, "Tell me who you really are"? Nathan didn't leave that coffee chat with a plan, he left with a responsibility. Not to elevate Alex as a token success story, but to rebuild a culture where no one like Alex would ever feel invisible again. 2 weeks later, Nathan called an all-hands meeting in the company's main auditorium, an unusual move for a CEO known more for private boardroom briefings than floor-wide announcements. Rumors spread quickly across departments. Some assumed it was another restructuring update. Others guessed a product launch. No one expected what actually happened. When the employees filed in and took their seats, they were surprised to see a modest man in custodial blues standing quietly near the podium. Nathan took the stage first, offering no dramatic introduction, just a nod toward the man beside him. "You've all walked past Alex Tran," he said. "Some of you have probably smiled at him. Most probably haven't spoken more than a word. But today you're going to hear from him." There was a beat of silence, then Alex stepped forward and unfolded a set of hand-prepared notes. What followed was a masterclass in global communication. He didn't read from slides. He told stories of language barriers turned into bridges, of missed meanings that cost companies millions, of gestures and idioms that could make or break trust in a negotiation. He cited real-world scenarios using Yoruba, Khmer, Arabic, Tagalog, and Wolof. He didn't just speak the words, he explained the emotional weight they carried. Within minutes, the skepticism in the room gave way to a stunned, reverent quiet. This wasn't just translation, this was diplomacy, connection, empathy in linguistic form. Alex didn't ask for validation, he gave them vision. One by one, the heads of departments who had previously questioned the value of frontline staff sat straighter, their expressions shifting from polite interest to genuine awe. Even the most seasoned members of the global strategy team were scribbling notes. When he finished, there was a long pause, followed by the kind of applause that starts slow but swells when people realize they've just witnessed something unforgettable. Nathan returned to the mic, calm but resolute. "Today wasn't just a presentation," he said. "It was a wake-up call." He scanned the room, making deliberate eye contact with the managers and directors seated in the front rows. "We talk a lot about talent pipelines and cultural intelligence, but we've been looking in the wrong places. From this day forward, Alex Tran is no longer our janitor. He is now our global multilingual advisor and a permanent member of the Intercultural Strategy Council." The room erupted, not in chaos, but in the kind of collective clarity that happens when a truth is finally spoken aloud. "And one more thing," Nathan added. "We're going to change the way we view frontline staff, not just in policy, but in practice. If someone in this building has something to say, we listen. That's not a perk, that's a standard." A standing ovation followed, not because the company had found a hero, but because it had reclaimed its integrity. In one afternoon, LinguaCore didn't just promote a janitor, it dismantled a hierarchy of assumptions. And as people filtered out of the auditorium, whispers replaced by thoughtful silence, it was clear something in the foundation had shifted, permanently. The months that followed brought a quiet but unmistakable transformation to LinguaCore's culture. What began as a single moment on a stage had sparked a broader reimagining of how the company valued its people. Departments started hosting weekly hidden talent spotlights, giving employees from every level, from mailroom staff to entry-level analysts, a chance to share personal skills, passions, and ideas. The initiative wasn't about forced inspiration or tokenism. It was about unearthing value that had always been there, just ignored. HR revamped its performance review system, shifting from title-based evaluations to a contribution-driven model that prioritized impact over hierarchy. Employees were no longer measured solely by their position on the org chart, but by how their work advanced the company's mission. connected with clients, and supported their peers. Recognition became more democratic and more meaningful. People who had once felt invisible, like the night shift IT technician with a background in UX design or the cafeteria chef, fluent in 5 African dialects, were finally being seen. For the first time in years, the break room buzzed with more than office gossip. It became a place of genuine curiosity and collaboration. And at the center of this shift stood Alex Tran, not as a mascot or media story, but as a working advisor who quietly but powerfully reshaped LinguaCore's approach to global strategy. In his first year as global multilingual advisor, Alex helped lead the company into 3 new international markets, Kenya, Cambodia, and Brazil, crafting communication protocols that resonated authentically with local partners and communities. Revenue from those regions increased by 37%, but more importantly, customer satisfaction and trust indicators soared. Internally, Alex became a mentor to junior staff interested in language, cultural diplomacy, and social mobility. He didn't carry an air of authority, but one of encouragement. People came to him not out of obligation, but because they knew he listened, fully and without judgment. Nathan, too, made good on his word. He showed up in departments he'd never visited before, sat in on night shift meetings, and held quarterly open forums where anyone, regardless of role, could pitch ideas or raise concerns. The tone at the top had changed, and it rippled all the way down. LinguaCore hadn't just patched over its gaps, it had redefined what it meant to lead, to listen, and to build a team where everyone felt they belonged. The results weren't loud or flashy, they were consistent, steady, and real. And as Alex often reminded new hires during orientation, language isn't just how we talk to the world, it's how we prove we're paying attention. The clip lasted just under a minute, but within 24 hours it had been shared over 300,000 times. It showed Alex Tran standing calmly on stage at an international language symposium, fielding rapid-fire questions from global delegates in 5 different languages: Portuguese, Arabic, Swahili, French, and Vietnamese, without breaking a sweat or glancing at notes. He didn't just translate words, he conveyed tone, emotion, cultural nuance. At one point, he paused to explain a proverb in Wolof that had no direct English equivalent, and made it make sense to a room full of policymakers. The audience, a mix of CEOs, diplomats, and linguists, rose to their feet in a standing ovation. But it was the caption beneath the viral video that captured hearts. "Never judge someone's voice just because they're holding a mop." That quote lit up timelines, conference room monitors, and HR posters across the country. It wasn't about token success. It was about a shift in perspective, one that challenged every assumption about visibility, worth, and where brilliance can live. Not all talent walks through the front door wearing a badge and a business suit. Some show up in silence, doing what needs to be done while carrying gifts the world forgot to ask about. In too many companies, leadership equates visibility with value. And in doing so, they miss the quiet genius standing right beside them. What Nathan Hayes discovered in Alex wasn't just a multilingual savant. He uncovered the blind spot in his company's culture, a leadership structure so top-heavy it failed to listen to those who weren't speaking loud enough or from the right floor. True leadership isn't about who speaks the most in meetings. It's about who makes space for others to speak. And real organizational strength isn't built on hierarchy, it's built on curiosity, humility, and the courage to unlearn what we think we know about people. Alex never needed a title to feel worthy. What he needed, and what every overlooked employee needs, is the opportunity to use their voice without fear it'll be dismissed before the second sentence. The best ideas don't always come from consultants. Sometimes they come from the man cleaning the floors at midnight, who sees everything but is rarely seen himself. That's not just poetic, it's a wake-up call. If this story made you stop for a moment, if it reminded you of someone you walk past every day without a second thought, then don't let it end here. Share it, talk about it, and most importantly, look around you. Who's been silent not because they lack ideas, but because no one ever gave them room? Whether you're a CEO, a team lead, or just someone trying to build something meaningful, remember, the greatest value isn't always in who talks the loudest, but in who's finally invited to speak. There's an Alex in every building. Maybe it's time we all started listening. And if stories like this resonate with you, follow X Daily Stories for more real narratives that shine light on the unseen. One story can change everything.